Matthew Whitaker, acting AG. Whitaker's a vocal critic of the Mueller investigation. On his first day on the job, Whitaker announced a new rule that will give President Trump new power to deny asylum to migrants who are fleeing Central America. Joining us now to talk about all of this, we have former director of the CIA and NSA, General Michael Hayden. He served in both Republican and Democratic administrations and is CNN's national security analyst. General, we have a lot of national security questions for you. So look, as you know, for more than a month now, we have been debating with people from the White House, with President Trump's surrogates, about this group of migrants who are still some 800 miles from the southern border making their way here. They have tried to say that they are not entitled to come into the United States and that that is illegal. We have pointed out that it is perfectly legal to come and seek asylum in the United States, and there's a process for doing that. Well, as of today, that process is changing, and President Trump is going to deny asylum for asylum seekers. I mean, he's making it much, much more restrictive. Do you think that this group of migrants are a national security issue? Does the president need to go to these lengths to change asylum laws?
No, I don't. And I called the faux deployment of our forces to the border several weeks ago security theater rather than any response to a real bona fide threat to the United States. And Allison, if you read the background briefing given by the Department of Defense discussing the deployment there, you look at the intelligence estimate, it is inconsistent with the kind of language that we're hearing from the president. This was all about last Tuesday, not what's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 weeks along our southern border. And then with the president changing by executive fiat the processes for trying to claim asylum here in the United States, I think that's going to be hit with a court challenge very quickly, and we'll see if the president indeed has that authority.
One thing that is a national security crisis is gun violence in America. The number of mass shootings has increased. And the number, if I can just pull up for everybody, this is, I believe, since 2007. You can see these mass shootings that are, 10 people or above, as we've seen again yesterday. And I mean, just look at that. I mean, the numbers are so hideous, General. I mean, from Las Vegas, 58 people killed. The Pulse nightclub, 49 people killed. Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook. I mean, all of these have just been seared into our national consciousness. And in the past year alone, I believe there have been 4 or 5. So President Trump has not made us safer in terms of these mass shootings. What is the solution?
Well, it's a long-term solution, and let me just say I am a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and I believe that as a country we are badly overarmed, and I don't think those are inconsistent statements at all. I mean, when events like this happen, Allison, we have folks pointing out that these are likely inevitable, and we're saying that in the only country in the world in which these kinds of events routinely happen. I'm part of a group that's lobbying for better gun laws, and the core of my belief here is that there are certain weapons that no one should have, and there are some people out there who should not be allowed to have any weapons, and we can do that and still remain true to the Second Amendment.
I mean, it's just such a tough one because this person was a vet. He, I believe, had a gun legally, but then he came back and had mental health issues. And the question is, what do you do with that situation?
Well, again, I mean, we're very sensitive to our liberties. The Constitution is fairly explicit. We push back stronger than even our Western European or Canadian friends with regard to government intervention in these kinds of matters. But as you point out, Allison, the statistics speak for themselves. We're not doing this right, and we need to have an honest discussion without this reflexive emotionalism that we get when anyone brings up the question about limiting what kinds of weapons people should get or who should get weapons.
Yeah, we appreciate that. We appreciate you being part of that discussion. Okay, Matthew Whitaker, were you surprised that Jeff Sessions was fired within minutes of President Trump determining that the GOP had held on to the Senate and that Matthew Whitaker was named acting Attorney General?
Well, I was a little bit surprised with regard to the speed, a little bit surprised that Attorney General Sessions wasn't allowed to stay until the end of the week, which apparently he had requested. And frankly, Mr. Whitaker's credentials for the job are simply his personal and political loyalty to President Trump. So I can only imagine how this is playing out with the workforce in the Department of Justice and the FBI, and I don't think it's positive.
Well, one of his credentials appears to also be disdain for the Mueller probe.
Right.
So he has expressed on television and in op-eds that he thinks the scope is too broad and is not a fan of the Mueller probe. And so, I mean, look, this is this smacks of a conflict of interest, and some people, including George Conway in an op-ed, have gone so far as to call it unconstitutional and illegal. Your thoughts?
Yeah. So you've got two questions here. Number one, about the lawfulness of the appointment, and legal scholars are pointing out that this may indeed be unlawful, illegal, and illegitimate, and his actions that he takes will not have the force of law. And then you've simply got the wisdom of this person who has, as I said, this body of work in opposition to the Mueller probe. Now, Whitaker's been quiet for the last 72 hours, and I think that's a good idea. But, Allison, I think we can all agree that Rod Rosenstein was a firewall for the Mueller investigation. That firewall is now removed, and so the odds that we're going to end up in a political or perhaps even constitutional crisis have been increased with the appointment of Mr. Whitaker.
All right, General Michael Hayden, thank you very much. Great to talk to you. All right, is it deja vu of 2000 in Florida all over again? A consequential recount battle looms over the Sunshine State. We have the latest vote totals for you next.
Feel this election.
His primary evidence seems to be that his voter margin is going down. That's not an indication that there is fraud.
Any Republicans who say that there's rampant fraud in America, prove it.
This is a pattern of incompetence, and it's embarrassing to the state.
I ran for my life. By the grace of God, I got out through the front entrance.
I talked to him before he headed out the door. Last thing I said was, son, I love you.
This is America. It's gotta change. This doesn't happen anywhere else on planet Earth.
We are a hurting city, but the dawn will break. We are Thousand Oaks strong.
This is New Day with Allison Camerata and John Berman.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to your new day. It is Friday, November 9th, 8 o'clock in the East. This morning, Florida is Florida, except more so. This is the headline of the Miami Herald. The state that brought you the 2000 presidential recount will try to outdo itself in 18. 3 huge races appear headed to a recount, including the incredibly high-profile Senate and governor's races. So forget election day. This really could be election months there, or month at least, and it could make the memory of hanging Chad seem quaint. The bitterness and partisan accusations, they are off the charts already. In the Senate race, the Republican nominee, Rick Scott, is clinging to a tiny and shrinking lead that is well within the margin for triggering an automatic recount, about 15,000 votes. But Scott, who is the current governor, from the governor's mansion, alleges rampant fraud in Broward and Palm Beach counties without proof. He says Democrats are trying to steal both races. Now, these are the same 2 counties that became somewhat legendary for their vote counting issues in the 2000 presidential election. The Scott campaign is suing the election supervisors in both counties. His Democratic rival, the incumbent Bill Nelson, calls those lawsuits politically motivated.
The race for governor in Florida may also be heading for a recount. Republican Ron DeSantis is clinging to a 0.4% lead over Andrew Gillum. Gillum already conceded, but now says he wants to make sure that every vote is counted. Right now, the ballot in Broward County is coming under scrutiny. If you take a look at your screen, you may understand why. Some believe the design of the ballot, well, caused confusion. Thousands of people who voted in the governor's race did not vote in the Senate contest. So why was that, other than they couldn't find it on the ballot? Also this morning, breaking news in Southern California. There are wildfires. They're raging out of control, burning homes. It is spreading quickly. We will have a live report in just minutes for you.
All right, first, let's discuss the election recount battles. Joining us, Jeffrey Toobin, legal analyst, CNN national political reporter Maeve Reston, and Florida reporter for Politico, Mark Caputo. Mark, we're deciding who the governor and senator in Florida will be. In my mind, there's no controversy whoever the president is. I think you're the president of Florida, at least when it comes to reporting there. So explain to me what's happening in Broward County. What's the issue as you see it? Why don't we have results yet?
It's a multifaceted question because Broward County is very often a mess when it comes to elections, and this is no exception. The big problem is that Broward County seems to have a problem tabulating votes quickly. It's the second largest county in the state, but Miami-Dade County, which is even larger, was able to upload all of its absentee ballots, its early vote ballots, its election day ballots in a timely fashion, and Broward just wasn't. And that's not really out of the ordinary for Broward. It has historically been slow. Compounding that problem is the fact that Broward County's election supervisor either refused to give or didn't have the number of outstanding ballots after Election Day to be counted. And then thousands of votes kept showing up. And so those who were, let's say, on the south end of watching their margin shrink, Republican Ron DeSantis for governor and Governor Rick Scott, who's running for Senate, started to raise the concern that, like, hey, look, this is so disorganized, we have no idea where these ballots are coming from, and we're not being given any information. They put in records requests, and then the next thing you know, they're suing because they're saying, look, we're not getting the public records that we're asking for, i.e. the ability to inspect these ballots so we can tally them, or a list of the number of ballots outstanding to be counted. You know, in the absence of information, conspiracy theories will fester, especially in very tight elections, and that's what we have here.
Great point. And so, Jeffrey, thousands of ballots kept showing up. That doesn't sound good. I mean, of course it's mass confusion. Of course people are suspect about what's happening and where it is, and I don't even know how a recount would solve some of these problems.
Well, yeah, I think it actually would solve a lot of these problems, because eventually all the ballots will appear, and then you will look at what they show. Remember, all of us who, I was in Florida for the whole 36 days in 2000.
You were golfing.
I was not. The Chads, everybody remembers.
Singular is Chad.
Singular is Chad. The punch card ballots, they're all gone. They don't have those sorts of ballots anymore. They are optical scan ballots, like the standardized test. Right. Which are a lot easier to determine.
No, clearly there was some confusion.
Well, there was confusion about where the ballots were, but once they all surface, the recount itself should not be as problematic as it was in 2000.
Fair enough, but I mean the one that we put up on the screen where they couldn't find, after a series of very small print instructions, then you get to the vote for what, Senate at the bottom?
Yeah.
And so that one was missed by a lot of people.
Right, and ballot design is a very big issue. In 2000, ballot design was a huge issue in Palm Beach County, where there was the so-called butterfly ballot, which led to a lot of people voting for Pat Buchanan, who meant to vote for Al Gore. Without question, that cost Al Gore the election. You can't cure a ballot design problem in a recount.
Exactly.
I mean, if they didn't vote, they didn't vote. That issue is off the table. But if the ballots are found, then those will be counted.
That could be as many as 24,000 too. But you're right. The end game for Bill Nelson there is it just sucks for him. If it was all due to ballot design, that those votes weren't cast, nothing will ever come of it. It's striking to me that there could be a legal battle here, there could be a political battle, but there is very much a public relations battle. And the Republicans have learned the lessons from the example they set in 2000 here. That's why Rick Scott is out there at the governor's mansion charging fraud. You have to set the narrative that you are having this stolen from you. The fact that Andrew Gillum conceded on election night is a huge problem for the Democrats because just from a public relations standpoint, it's hard to unconcede.
Right, and of course it's so unusual that we, at this moment in time, have the president intervening via tweet after that very blistering statement last night from Rick Scott about the two lawsuits that he's filed against officials in Broward County and Palm Beach County. And it's just so unusual that you would have this situation where, in fact, the chief executive is ordering his Department of Law Enforcement to look into what he considers to be potential voter fraud and tampering here. I will point out, though, that there are also, just questions and Mark alluded to this, but questions about Broward County competence. On the other side, where I spoke to a teacher last night who had found this box-marked provisional ballots in a storage area where voters had been voting on Tuesday. And she brought this to the attention of a state representative who then took it to the Broward County Elections Board, and he was just told, well, there's just election paper in there, without anyone, as far as he knew, going out to check and see what was in this box. So there are concerns on both sides about what's happening with ballots, and it seems like this is just a controversy that is going to go on for weeks, if not months.
Mark, none of this inspires confidence. Are there competent people in Broward County and South Florida that are going to be able to, take charge of this and figure it out?
Well, as alluded to earlier by Jeff Toobin, is that they are going to do a recount, and because FDLE is going to be there, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, it's going to be done under the watchful eye of investigators. So we're going to have a final result, and it's going to be rather clear. I do wonder if Brenda Snipes, who is the Broward County Election Supervisor, we mentioned this today in our stories in Politico, as well as Politico Playbook, how to plug that, is that she doesn't look like she's necessarily going to survive this. There are mounting calls from the left, from the right, and the center to remove her from office. Brenda Snipes' predecessor in 2003 was removed from office by the Florida Senate after she was suspended by Governor Jeb Bush for incompetence because she botched the 2002 gubernatorial primary in Broward County, statewide in Florida. So we're looking probably at more of the same from Brenda Snipes after the smoke clears here. There are just numerous cases where Snipes has been sued, and successfully so, for mismanaging the handling of ballots, also for destroying ballots that have been requested by a former congressional candidate for review, and the like. There's just case after case after case. And on the right, left, and center, people say, yes, this does not inspire confidence whatsoever in our system.
Make one point. The margin here in the governor's race is 16,000 votes. The margin in the Senate race is 16,000. The margin in the governor's race is 35,000. That's pretty big. Recounts rarely shift that much. Remember, the Gore-Bush recount was 500 votes.
Yes.
Very different from a matter of thousands.
That is totally, absolutely true. The one thing I will say is they're not actually done counting yet, though, and one of the unknowns is how many votes are still out there, which is so frustrating, I think, to both sides.
If the final margin before the recount is something like this, it seems almost inconceivable that the number
Two things need to happen. It needs to get much narrower, and then would be the recount.
The final number.
I think it's interesting. If you look at what's happening in Florida and you look at the president's statement on this, I think it's part of a bigger thing here, because there are also very tight races that are still in dispute in Georgia, for instance, where Stacey Abrams has not conceded yet. In Arizona, where they're still counting votes, and Kyrsten Sinema is now in front. The Democrat is now in front there. And in California, where you are, there are still a bunch of House races where they're still counting. It seems to me that the president knows this. The president knows there are elections still in dispute, and elections he cares a lot about, particularly this one in Arizona, because this would be a flip from R to D, and this is him calling fraud and foul before the game has even begun.
That's exactly right. And of course, it's once again President Trump doing a very good job at changing the narrative. I mean, what we are seeing, particularly out west in Arizona and in these California House races, where it may be weeks before we know who the actual winner is that the narrative on election night about this being a very good night for Republicans in the Senate and, potentially not quite a blue wave for Democrats, that could all change. We don't know yet. It could be a much better night for Democrats in the end. And so President Trump is trying to take control of the narrative here and change the subject, certainly from what happened with Jeff Sessions this week and what may happen in the Justice Department. Of course, voter fraud is the favorite topic of Republicans, so he would very much like the conversation to go in that direction, John.
All right, Jeffrey, let's move on to Matt Whitaker.
Yes.
So he is the new acting attorney general. Some legal scholars, including George Conway, Kellyanne Conway's husband, who had this op-ed, calls his appointment unconstitutional and illegal. Do you agree?
I don't agree, actually. I think the president does have the power to do this. But I think there are really two issues about Whitaker right here. One is his appointment legal? There is basically no one who can file a lawsuit to challenge it. I mean, even if technically this is not a legal appointment, I don't think any court is going to remove him from office. No one would have legal standing to file that lawsuit. So that's mostly a theoretical debate about whether it's legal. The second issue is he qualified? Is he competent? Is he the appropriate person for the job? As more facts come out about his background, the stuff he has said about the Mueller investigation, his views about the Constitution, which seem way, way out of the mainstream.
Talking about that, Marbury versus Madison, which is one of those cases that's kind of foundational for the country.
1803, which was basically the case that established judicial review. It's the case that said the courts have the right to declare acts of Congress unconstitutional, a basic fundamental core principle of constitutional law. He's criticized that. Also, reports that CNN ran last night about Whitaker's own business dealings with a company he represented and was part of that was essentially shut down by the Federal Trade Commission as a fraudulent enterprise. When you add this up, his extremely bizarre constitutional views, his dubious business history, his questionable statements or highly biased statements about the Mueller investigation, why he is installed as the Attorney General of the United States is a difficult question to answer.
I'm not so sure it is a difficult question to answer. I think it may be the easiest question in the world to answer.
Well, Mr. Byrne, why don't you?
The answer is he was installed. Jeff Sessions was fired 10 minutes after the election because the political issues with mixing it up before the election went away, and the president wants protection in the Mueller probe. The president wants protection in the Mueller probe, and now he's got it. He's got a guy inside the investigation who can approve indictments or not. And politically speaking, and Caputo, I'll give you the last word here on this, you know, the same day that he fired Sessions and put his own guy in charge of the investigation, he also warned Democrats that if you investigate me, I'm coming after you. It seems to me he's challenged Democrats to go against him in this case, and I'm not quite sure I know what Democrats are going to do.
Well, understand that Donald Trump made this midterm a referendum on himself because he already knew it would be. And this was pretty simple, and I think President Trump understands the logic of votes. If you have more votes, you win more often. He won. He won in the United States Senate, and the United States Senate ultimately decides confirmations and the like. And until that dynamic changes, President Trump is going to be very aggressive and perhaps even more aggressive in pursuing his agenda than he ever was. Now, yes, he does have the check of the United States House, which is now going to be in Democratic hands. But from Trump's perspective, when you look at the United States Senate and you look at his second home in Florida, where both of his hand-picked candidates won, Trumpism won, Florida's Trump country, and he believes he's in great shape to win in 2020. And so far, the election results don't necessarily conflict with that idea.
Mark Caputo, Maeve Reston, Jeffrey Toobin, thank you very much.
A little premature, I would say, but
Today is a snapshot. Today is a snapshot of
I wasn't making a categorical comment. I was just saying that so far it doesn't really conflict with it.
So far.
I'm with you.
All right, thank you very much. Cody Kaufman.
Sarah Desan was inside that Southern California bar with her friend Cody Kaufman when a gunman opened fire. His father was grief-stricken when he spoke out just after learning that his son was killed.
I talked to him last night before he headed out the door. First thing I said was, please don't drink and drive. Last thing I said was, son, I love you. That was the last thing I said.
A short time ago, I spoke with Cody's friend, Sarah Desan, about that night.
This was like my third time at Borderline where I was with Cody or had met up with Cody, and we were just messing around, like playful, like fighting each other, and I kind of turned to him and like poked him or like kind of hit him to get his attention because we were just doing that all night. And as soon as I turned to him and did that, that's when something happened, and we both looked towards the door because we were kind of facing towards the door, and we looked, and that's when the gunshots started happening, and he said to drop down, so I fell to the ground with him.
So Cody told you to get down, and then what happened?
I was behind him, and I tucked myself into his back. Kind of, I don't know, just laying there in the ball. And then I just remember I looked behind me, and there was a smoke bomb going off. And I think it was Cody who had told me it's a smoke bomb. And that's when I was, I saw him get up, and apparently when he got up, I knew I need to go. And I guess he got up and stood up and said, "Get out." And that's one of the reasons my friend Cheyenne was able to get out, because she knew when Cody stood up and said you should when he said something, that's when she was able to escape. And same for me. When I knew he was up, I was following what he was doing. I was so shocked that I had no clue how to react, and I just did what he did. And when he said leave, and when he got up, I left, and I saw one opening and I ran for it. And unfortunately, he wasn't behind me.
How did you get the news that Cody was still in there and was killed?
All night, I texted him, and when I finally was okay, we can call him, I called him, and it was nothing, and I was worried. And we had friends around, and I just kept asking, have you heard from Cody? Has anyone found Cody? Where's Cody? And when I finally got to my friend's house at about 7 in the morning, that's when her mom was on the phone, and she confirmed to us that he had passed away, and it was absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah. We had a really heartbreaking conversation with his dad yesterday, just really minutes before his dad got the confirmation. And his dad was holding out hope, just like you were. And his dad kind of knew what Cody would have been doing in that bar that night. So let me just play this moment for you.
I'm afraid that Cody ran to the gunman instead of ran away from the gunman. That's the kind of boy that Cody was or is.
Yeah.
I'm sure he was there helping, shielding anything or anybody that he could. I know that he went there with a few of his girlfriends, so I'm hoping that he's okay.
Sarah, it sounds like that is what was happening, that he was shielding you.
Yeah, Cody was an amazing man and selfless in the way that, and I know he was put here to protect people. He was that's why I keep calling him my hero, because he was here for a reason, to protect people. I knew at one point he wanted to join the Navy or something like that, and I know that's what his calling was, to make sure people were safe. And what he did last night, he made sure people were safe. And now we all have a beautiful guardian angel watching over us, and that's all we can do, is pray and hope for peace.
Yeah. Some people are built differently than the rest of us. And some people know what to do in a moment like that, and they shield their friends, and they protect their friends, and they're not the first to run for the door. And that sounds like, I mean, his father, Cody's father, when we talked to him yesterday in that really horrible time period while he was waiting before he knew what had actually happened to Cody, he knew that that is what his son would have done, that would have been his son's first
Isn't that
instinct.
amazing? He told you, he goes, I think my son would have been the type to protect. Some people are just built differently than others. I think that goes for Sarah also. Can you imagine having the poise to have the discussion that she just had today, the day after she went through what she did?
No, it's going to be a long road, as we know, for these folks, because the mental scars will be with them forever. And another person who's obviously built differently is Sergeant Ron Hillis. He ran towards the danger even when he didn't have backup in order to try to stop the gunman from killing more people. People believe he was able to do that.
Look at these pictures. People lining up as his body was being moved there.
Spontaneously.
Yeah, I mean, really, this is treatment for a hero that is very, very much deserved.
Oh, it's so beautiful. He was on the force for 29 years. He was considering retiring in the next year. We know that he had a wife and a son. And I guess none of that mattered when all of this went down and he ran towards the danger.
Well, he did it for them. He did it for all of us. Look at this. Wildfires raging out of control in Southern California. Hundreds of homes have burned. Thousands of people being told to evacuate to safety. Our Nick Valenti is live in Paradise, California, a town that's just been devastated by these fires. Look at that around you, Nick.
John, this 24 hours ago was completely engulfed in flames here in Paradise, California. And the scene that you see behind me, it's what much of this town now looks like. It was an incredibly fast-moving fire. At the height of it, it was probably going about a football field every 3 seconds. In less than a day, the fire that hit here in Paradise, California, and has now moved north, grew to the size of half of San Francisco, and part of that reason were the conditions. And California, not just here in Northern California, but also in Southern California, I believe we have some live aerials out of Ventura where CAL FIRE is also dealing with a major fire going there. This is untypical for this time of year. Usually around Halloween is when you start to see the rain that signals the end of fire season, but you're still dealing with what we're dealing with now. Most of this area has been evacuated. The only people left behind here are firefighters and police trying to maintain the integrity of the structures that are left behind. We have seen countless stories on social media of people being caught off guard and trying to escape, making these harrowing journeys on roads that were lined with flames. We want to show you one of those.
We are evacuating Paradise, California. We can't even see. We don't know where the fire is. So please pray for us that we get out of here, okay?
The family of a local TV reporter frantically racing to escape the raging flames of the campfire.
This is unreal. Yeah. Never seen anything like it.
Blinded by smoke, the family struggles to navigate their way down streets lined with flames, unsure if they were driving away from the fire or toward it.
Oh God, no. We passed it. What are we gonna do?
The heat taking its toll on young children in the car.
I hope Mom's gonna be all right. God, it's so hot. I know, baby. Hold on. Can't see. It'll be all right. We'll be okay.
The family quickly realizing that they had left 2 of their 5 cats behind.
How many cats do we have in the car? 3.
Losing hope, the children's father encourages his terrified family to pray.
It's everywhere. Yeah. God, we'll be okay. Just pray. Please help us, Lord. Everything is going to be gone. Please, Lord Jesus, please be with us, Lord.
Eventually, the road clears. The family's prayers answered.
Go, go, go! We made it through, Christian. We got it. Thank you, my brothers.
Just absolutely terrifying. That family so lucky to be alive. No injuries, or I should say a handful of injuries, no deaths reported officially here so far. And some good news in all of this, John and Allison, is that this fire, the winds have changed direction, pushing this fire north back towards the canyon. I spoke to a CAL FIRE spokesman earlier this morning who says the plan now is to contain this at the edges and work their way back. John, Allison?
Oh my God, Nick, that video is so terrifying where the family doesn't know if they're going towards the fire or away from it. And yet, I mean, we've heard the videos like this before where people in the car are calm enough to pray. It's just, that is really remarkable. Thank Thank you for bringing that to us.
And calm enough to film, too, which is a little bit strange.
I know. I mean, we get to see it because
Yeah.
of that, but I don't know how they have the presence of mind. Okay, we're following some other breaking news. Wait till you see this video. 6 people are injured after this plane crash lands in Guyana. Look at this. 128 people were on board. This is a Fly Jamaica flight. It was headed to Toronto when the pilot reported technical difficulties and turned around. Incredibly, there were no life-threatening injuries.
Well, somehow they managed to land that plane well. That is incredible that no one was seriously hurt. All right, for the first time since Democrats retook control of the House, the Democratic leader, Nancy Pelosi, sat down for an interview. She did so exclusively with CNN's Chris Cuomo.
What is your level of confidence that you'll be the Speaker of the House?
Ooh.
Oh. What did
did
she say?
What's her answer? And what really happened when President Trump called her after the